I often get told by my clients that if I sit there and say, look, we haven't made a profit this year, you know, your dividends are obviously going to have significant impacts to, you know, the future, cash flow, etc. There's this kind of almost statement that, I don't know if there's an entrepreneur's book out there where it says how to turn around and speak to finance people when it comes to my personal money book. I'm sure there is. And they basically say, yeah, but I've got reserves in the balance sheet.
Yeah, okay, that's an interesting one. I suppose ultimately the reserves are there. If the cash is there, technically you could whittle down your reserves. But by doing that, you're obviously devaluing those reserves. They're depleting, they're going. So if you were to go and sell that business, you don't have that value in your balance sheet essentially to sell. But also, I think if you're depleting your balance sheet, i.e. using those reserves each year, then it's not sustainable.
No.
And I think that's the point, isn't it? That when you're looking at how much you can pay yourself and that setting that sort of level of dividends, it should be sustainable. You know, you because otherwise, okay, you might do that, 2 years, even 3 years, but 4th year, you can't. You've now no value in your company. Everything has been used, if you like, it's gone. And then what? What do you do at that point?
How do you tackle that when you see that? Because I suppose you have the privileged situation where sometimes you only see people's books annually.
Yeah.
And then actually by the work in year 2, you will be able to say, I think there's a trend happening here. You know, you're taking more dividends than you are profits that are being made. How are you? Because there's also, I find it really funny that there's sometimes a disconnect in the owner's mind from investing back into the business, and how their dividends and taking dividends has no impact on being able to have cash to reinvest back in the business. And there is no correlation there. And I find that I find that sometimes quizzical of how they can disassociate their money or their perceived money from actually the business should still grow.
And I think that goes back to what I was saying, where people feel entitled to a level of money because of what they're doing. And therefore, once they've got that money, that was the bit they were entitled to. So, well, they've either spent it, so there is nothing to potentially put back in anyway. It's gone. And well, why should I put my money back in?
Yeah.
But I suppose a true entrepreneur knows that sometimes you have to put your money back in to actually enable the business to potentially just continue, or at least, you know, it might be to grow, but it could just be propping it up for a period of time where, you know you've got a tough 6 months coming up. The horizon perhaps is looking good, but you know you've got that short-term problem. So you have got to put a bit of money back in. You might be able to take it back out down the road, and hopefully that's what you're going to do. Hopefully it's going to build and become more money that you can take out. But there's no certainty, and it's very difficult being a business owner, is that there is no certainty.
No.
You're not working for someone. You don't have a regular amount of money potentially coming in every month that is guaranteed. You know, you are running your business, and you have to kind of go with
the ebbs and flows.
Exactly. Every business has them. You know, very few just keep going up. Most will hit problems here and there. And I think I suppose it comes down to the responsibility in a way, isn't it, of being a business owner, is riding that out sometimes, and you know, take the good, but then you have to pull back when times are tough. And having that conversation, as you asked, is really difficult, because I think people don't feel they should pull back.
When you're trying to have that conversation,
how?
Well, how? But I suppose, do you ever get the results that you want? Because I suppose from your perspective, you are looking out for the business's interests.
Exactly. I think it's a bit of a mix, to be honest. You know, we had quite a lot of businesses after COVID that were struggling, and one in particular I can think of with a couple of guys, and they'd always taken out a set amount of money. We don't really have a huge amount to do with them during the year, because they've got an in-house finance team. So come the year-end accounts the next year, which was probably 6-7 months, the meeting post year end, it was in a pretty bad situation. And it was a pretty difficult conversation to say, you know, if you carry on like this, you don't have a business next year. So you have to scale down what you are taking out of your business to be here next year, because you are only making X amount of money, but you're taking twice that at the moment. And it's allowing you to do that. But as you say, only because they've built up reserves.
Yeah.
And that's only going to continue for so long. And actually, with that one in particular, was extremely well received, because it was a bit of a wake-up call to them to go, okay, well, we want to take this money. So how do we get the business? Can we get the business back to them?
Exactly.
Meanwhile, we've got to scale back. We're going to have to reduce our drawings, which is the outcome you want, because that's responsible, isn't it, essentially?
Had they made the connection, though, that it was their dividend drawings that was actually causing that level of hardship?
No, I don't think so, actually.
No.
I think it was almost like, when I said that to them in the meeting, that was really the first moment in time I think they'd actually thought, oh, we can't take this money out. Just because we always had, we're not making that money anymore. So it was quite, and I did leave. I left and felt really bad.
Yeah.
Because it was like I was telling them something they didn't know.
Yes.
And
yes.
I'm an accountant, I'm a business owner, but I know how my business is doing, and I know how to know how my business is doing. And sometimes I forget that people don't always understand these things, and actually just maybe don't know. And therefore it is a shock when someone turns around and tells them a reality that they perhaps just hadn't realised was a reality. And I think that was really genuine with the one I'm thinking, or the clients I'm thinking of. And interestingly, so this was a couple of years ago, the meeting the following year was tough. Things hadn't improved, I think. But then, having said that, we were quite far into that year already when I went to see them. So if you think about the changes they were making, most of that year hadn't had those changes in. So we weren't in a dissimilar situation at that point. But the following year, things had completely turned around.
Amazing.
The profit had increased. They had lowered their drawings, or their dividends they were taking by a huge amount. And suddenly we were looking at a completely different business again. Yeah. And actually, as an accountant, that was really, really rewarding.
Yes.
To know that, okay, if you hadn't, or if I hadn't have had that really difficult conversation with them,
they may not even exist.
I don't think they'd have been there, to be honest.